All right. I want to talk about Dustin Poirier and what is next for him. We're going to talk about that in a second. What do you think of his performance at UFC 302? I'll tell you what I thought of his performance. Quite surprising. Really surprising. For the simple fact that I really thought he would have gotten finished somewhere in the first or second round. That wasn't the case. Unfortunately, for Dustin Poirier, he got stopped eventually in the fifth round. Keep in mind, Islam Makhachev, best fighter in the world. No doubt about this, right? Is there anybody out there that is in doubt that Islam Makhachev is the best in the world? We can have a different discussion later on about Jon Jones and Islam Makhachev, because that is what this video is really about. I'm going to be honest with you. At first, I was going to make this video about what is next for Dustin Poirier. And quite frankly, I think I'm just going to leave that for a live session to talk about in that particular platform, in a live session, rather than this video form. Because in this video form, I think the best discussion to have is the pound-for-pound rankings between Jon Jones and Islam Makhachev. Why? Why is that an important conversation to have right now? Dana White said in the press conference post-fight something to the extent of, you know what? I think Jon Jones is the best fighter in the world. He's proven it. He cleaned out the 205 division and went on in the heavyweight division to become the heavyweight champion after a vacancy from Francis Ngannou. And of course, there's many arguments with that, based on the performance of Jon Jones, based on the struggles that he had to go through with Dominic Reyes, and a whole bunch of other names that he has gone through. But I'm going to talk about that as well, because that seems to be a very big criticism on Jon Jones, right? Why? Well, you look at all the other champions that have dominated. Anderson Silva, the way that he finished guys. You take a look at, let's say, Islam Makhachev, even the way that he's finishing guys. And by the way, this is crucial to the argument that is happening right now between Jon Jones and Islam Makhachev, and quite frankly, there is no argument at all. Understand this. When it comes to Jon Jones, I think a part of him does care about his legacy. He cares. He cares about what people thinks, but at the same time, he also doesn't. In other words, he cares that people think he's the best for the work that he's done, but he doesn't want people to criticize him for being a coward, quote unquote, for not taking the fight against Tom Aspinall. So we're going to talk all about that. Because Islam Makhachev, quite frankly, does not care. He's not that type of person to care about these particular matters. Jon Jones, on the other hand, maybe not so much, but to a certain extent, really this particular argument is for the fans. And the idea of comparing pound for pound, I think is really ridiculous, in all honesty. Because number one, none of these guys are going to fight each other. They're not in the same weight class. They're not in the same category. And for whatever reason, we can't just look at each individual in their own weight class that they're dominating in and say, you know what? We can respect him for what he's doing on this lane. And then this guy, Jon Jones, we can respect him for what he's doing on this lane. I gotta tell you, this same argument had happened when Khabib was active, before it was Islam that replaced Khabib as the dominant 155 champion. The cameraman for Team Dominance, Will Harris. You guys know him. He's done documentaries about Khabib countless times on his channel, Anatomy of a Fighter. I urge you guys to check out Will Harris in that. He was in a Joe Rogan podcast. You want to know what he said to Joe Rogan? He said to Joe Rogan, listen, this argument about Khabib and Jon Jones, I'm going to tell you guys, Khabib does not care. And this was during the time when Khabib was just fresh off retirement, even way before Islam Makhachev was world champion. Will Harris, Joe Rogan podcast, he said this. Khabib does not care. These are not the type of matters that Khabib cares about. Obviously, you guys know that Team Eagle, Khabib, Islam, and all those guys are devoutly religious. So these particular matters, they don't really care about. You also got to understand this. Islam Makhachev said in the media day of last week on Fight Week, something to the effect of, you know what? Our team is not about arguing who is the most popular guy or who has the most clout or anything like that. It's not the type of team that we are. And you got to respect him for that. You got to respect him for taking that particular life choices of not being jealous, of not trying to outdo or trying to compete in terms of popularity with your team. It's a very toxic way of interacting with your teammates, guys that are helping you become the best in the world. But unfortunately, that same toxicity also falls into the conversations that the fans are having when it comes to the pound for pound number one. Now, is it a useful argument to have? In my true to God, honest opinion, no, I don't think that it is. I think that we should just judge guys for the individual weight classes that they are in and just have these guys stay in their lane and nothing more, nothing less. Anything more than that, I think, is just speaking in terms of speculatory conversations. So if you're having speculatory type of conversations, you got to ask yourself, is any of this true? Because you can't compare and contrast two guys that are in two different weight classes that are dealing with two different type of competitive scenarios. But the world wants to entertain it. The world wants to lit flames and start beef with camps and crews and people arguing over these matters. And it's not like Jon Jones is ever going to fight Islam Makhachev. It's not that kind of deal, is it? It's not that kind of situation. So why bring it up? Simply because it's entertaining. But quite frankly, in all true to God honesty, it's not my kind of entertainment. Okay? Especially as a purist. It's not my kind of entertainment. Because there are weight classes in fighting for a reason. Now, let's blatantly just ask the question, right? Can Jon Jones beat Islam Makhachev in a fight? Of course. There is a size difference, okay? And you have to respect that. There's no doubt about it. Ain't no doubt about it. There is a weight class difference, and we know that. So if that's the argument, then guess what? It's already solved. And you're hearing this from a guy that supports Islam, Khabib, and all those guys in that particular team. I want you to think about that. But when it comes to resumes, I'm sorry to tell you, 16 fights is the record right now for Anderson Silva. 15 behind him is Kamaru Usman. Islam right now at 14. Where is Jon in that? Maybe because he had a no contest in one of his fights that they decided to sort of cut off his winning streak of some sort. But either way, by the end of the day, this conversation about pound for pound, it's not the most useful argument there is. But if you think so, then that's on you. But understand it for what it is. It's speculatory. It's not anything that is solid in terms of trying to get fights together, especially not with Jon Jones and Islam. And more importantly, it's a subjective opinion, not an objective opinion. You want to know what an objective opinion is? I'll say it right now. Dustin Poirier needs to retire. That's an objective opinion. Why? Why is it an objective opinion and saying it in such an oxymoronic way? Right? Because objective is not an opinion. Subjective is. Why? Why do I say that? Because even though it's my opinion, it is a fact that you take serious damage in the fight game. And we know that Dustin Poirier has taken way too much damage. So as a result, he needs to retire in order to have a better quality of life in his post-retirement career. And here's another thing that I want to bring up, since we are in the subject of this, right? Something I'm going to add to the video. I don't think it's a good idea to bring your kids to watch you fight. Watch you get choked out, watch you get knocked out. I saw Conor McGregor wrote towards Dustin, imagine taking your daughter to watch you get choked out. That's what he wrote on Twitter. And obviously, like Conor McGregor fashion, he probably erased it, as he always does. But you never know. Maybe it's still up there and you could go check it out and let me know. But he's right. He's mentioned this before. Okay, he's mentioned this when Kamaru Usman got knocked out by Leon Edwards. He said, listen, this is not moving forward. This is not responsible to have your kids watch you in your fights. And I agree with him. You want to know another thing I agree on in terms of your kids and being a fighter? Stop exposing them to the media of fighting. Stop exposing them to cameras and what. But people are going to do it anyway. People are going to put their kids on social media. People are going to put their kids in the camera. But I tell you what, I don't agree with it. There are fighters that don't do it, and there are a lot of fighters that do it. To each its own. For me, in my true to God honest opinion, I just wouldn't do it. It's not my kind of style. It's not what I want to do. It's not the type of life that I want to expose to the world. But to some fighters, they like looking like the family man. Right? This is another thing that's so weird to me about this whole situation, right? They always praise the fighter who shows their kids and their families on TV and say something to the effect of, oh, look how wholesome this guy is. But is that really wholesome or is that exploitive? Because I know different people out there are going to have a different view. Oh, you know what? It's not exploitive. It's not anything that is wrong to do. But for me, I prefer my life to be private. I prefer my life to be separated from these things. Because guess what? George St. Pierre said, hey, you know what? I never show my family. I never show my kids or anyone that I have a relationship with. Because my opponent, they're going to use that against me. And if my opponent say something to my family, then it is something very bad. And they are not going to be able to take it. And I'm not going to be able to take it. And I'm going to go crazy. That's George St. Pierre in the process of that, right? He doesn't want to do that, and he's smart of not doing that. All throughout the times that he's faced some trash-talking opponents, from the likes of Josh Koscheck, all the way to, let's say, Nick Diaz, and maybe even Jake Shields you could throw in that mix, although he was very respectful nonetheless. And maybe even Michael Bisping at the end of his career or in his last fight. Nobody has ever brought up George St. Pierre's family. But when it came to Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier, it was easy target. It was easy pickings. And guess what? This is a reason why Dustin Poirier does not want to fight Colby Covington. Because he knows that Colby Covington is going to bring his family into the mix and say some real weird and creeped out stuff to try to get in his head. And guess what? Why would he not? It's the art of war. It's what will get you off your game. And guess what? As emotional as Dustin Poirier was in the first time that he fought Conor McGregor in 2014, he seems to be a whole lot more composed now in his older age. But guess what? The difference is that particular part of Dustin Poirier, it's still there. And the fact that that particular person in Dustin Poirier is still there, the hothead, the person that will have an emotional breakdown, he can't go through having a fight with Colby Covington because, quite frankly, from the very beginning of his career, he brought it upon himself in bringing his family into this whole entire mix of MMA media. So for now, that is all that I have. Let's recap of all the things that I had just talked about. The pound-for-pound conversation with Jon Jones and Islam Makhachev. Is it even a real conversation to begin with? Number 2, Dustin Poirier on whether he should retire or whether he should continue, but more so the conversation of whether we should allow our families to watch us fight or put them in social media or any type of media out there for people to judge and criticize. Because here's something you got to understand before I sign off on this video. When you are a public figure, when you put yourself out there, and that includes fighting, because I know a lot of fighters don't like to believe that they're putting themselves out there, but you are, because you're displaying your skills to the world, and therefore people are going to be intrigued by you as a result of that. And not only intrigued by you, they're going to be intrigued by whatever it is that you show them. And whatever it is that you show them is all up for criticism. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, write on the comments below and let me know your criticism that I am open to, as I'm giving myself to the public in this particular matter, in this particular instance, similar to the stories that I'm just talking about right now. I will see you guys on the next content. Like and subscribe. And of course, I'm going to see you in the next one, and the next one, and the next one, so I can do it again and again and again and again. Let's ride in the West Side. West Side.